You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
Greetings, exalted ones, and welcome back to Making Tracks Reaction Chat for our Book of Boba Fett First Reactions, brought to you by those skugholes over at fanthatracks.com. Before we go any further, this is a spoiler-filled discussion, so if you haven't seen Chapter 6 of the Book of Boba Fett yet, then you may want to pause this podcast and come back once you have. You have been warned. So, if you remember, in Chapter 5, for Return of the Mandalorian, we caught up with a Grogu-less Din Djarin as he found his way back into a Mandalorian covert. We learnt more about how some of the Mandalorians survived the Night of a Thousand Tears, and a little more history about the Darksaber as he was trained by the Armourer. That didn't last too long, as he was expelled when the Armourer challenged him about his commitment to wearing his helmet, and he heads off back to Tatooine, where Peli Motto has found him a replacement ship for the Razor Crest, only to be disappointed that it wasn't another Razor Crest, but instead a Nubian N1 starfighter, in a sorry state of repair. Following the fixer-up montage and a quick blitz round Beggar's Canyon, Din is offered work by Fennec Shan to join Boba's army as he fights for control of Tatooine away from the Pikes. But before he can aid Boba, Din has one last stop to make. This week, we pick up Din's story in Chapter 6, From a Desert Comes a Stranger, directed by Dave Filoni and with a runtime of 47 minutes. And helping me pick apart this stonker of an episode and give his first reactions is our main man from the Midlands, Mark Newbold. How you doing, old buddy?
I'm very well. I'm very excited. I'm literally buzzing. I've had a busy work day and I've come home and then I watched that and now I'm talking about it. I'm a happy bunny or a happy hoojib as it goes.
Happy hoojib. So you're not one being used to wipe the under tits of a sweaty hut then, I take it.
You know, if this was a regular episode, the under tits of a sweaty hut would become the title of the show. It really would. But no, I'm not that hoojib. I'm proper buzzing. We're going to bounce all over the shop. There's no structure to this. It is random blurts of joy.
Okay.
Yes, very happy.
Go on then. So in that case, give us your first initial reactions. Literally, first reactions after the end of the credits.
Why haven't I got time to watch this again before we record this episode? That was one of the first ones. So many things in that episode I did not expect to see. Certainly not in this episode. I did not expect to see Luke to such a degree.
Oh my God.
I certainly did not expect to see... I didn't expect to see the blue backpack again. I didn't expect to see Ahsoka. When Cad Bane came out of the desert, I was like jaw drop. Seeing Cobb Vanth was fantastic. Freetown as opposed to Mos Pelga. So many clever nods and great visuals as always. Filoni, I'm doing the we're not worthy bow at the moment. And I don't like to do that too much because, you know, you set the bar. Last week set a very high bar on first view. And I've watched that episode 3 or 4 times. I'm in love with that episode from last week. This week, I've got a feeling I might watch it another couple of 3 times and that might even nudge it because this week was something else.
Oh, wasn't it just? To say that I was blown away was a complete understatement. And the thing for me, as I finished watching it, I was like, do you know what? We saw loads of people comment about this rather snarkily on social media saying, season 3 of The Mandalorian and all that for last week's episode. At the end of this episode, I was just like, do you know what? This is just Star Wars. It doesn't matter what the title is. Is it The Mandalorian? Is it The Book of Boba Fett? This is just Star Wars at some of its best storytelling, I think, ever. And that is saying something. First thing first, we see Cobb Vanth. And I think, for me anyway, if you were to give me a chance to kind of say, who do you reckon is going to come to Boba's aid? I would have probably put Cobb Vanth on that list because he's in Tatooine. We know he's kind of a marshal and a good gunfighter. So he kind of made a lot of sense. And the fact that we saw that kind of opening prologue with him straight away, and then obviously creating his own heat with the Pikes, I thought that was a really good way of setting stuff up, hopefully, for the next episode.
Yeah, it was clever in the sense that, like you say, when Cad Bane turns up, you kind of got the sense that, apart from the fact he's got his deputy sort of buzzing around, getting in the way and trying to make a name for himself, ultimately he did, but not in the way he wanted to. That you could see that Vanth has got a lot going on. He's thinking, he's trying to take care of this and take care of that. But also, like you just said, completely created his own heat with the Pikes, down to letting them take the cantonment of money away, but kicking the box of spice over, which, as the one Pike said, is probably worth more than your entire town. Probably regretting that now. A very symbolic moment to kick the spice over. But let's be practical about living on Tatooine. It's hard and it's tough, and you get what you can where you can. And morals have to be flexible, I think, to live on Tatooine. And so when, you know, that whole sequence of him dealing with the Pikes was great. I mean, they do set up that face-off at the end in the sense of we, as Star Wars fans, know Cad Bane is a lethal MF. You know, no messing about it. He's not lasted this long. He's not got through the battles he's got through and survived to this far after Return of the Jedi by not being a badass. That's a given. You know, if you see that shadow in the distance and you go, that's Cad Bane, then you don't need to know anything else. Just like Boba Fett. If you know enough about Boba Fett, it's like, don't need to see him do anything. You know that the reputation is there, but you did see more of Cad Bane do it in the Clone Wars than you kind of ever have seen Fett do it. But for Vanth, you know, we know he can handle himself. We saw that in the Marshal. By the way, the Crate Dragon head on top of the Sandcrawler, absolutely love that.
Oh, that was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And also the Crate Dragon ribcage inside the bar. Did you notice that?
I didn't notice that.
It's almost like they've even managed to put the ribcage of the Crate Dragon inside the bar. They built the bar around the Crate Dragon. I mean, I assumed it wasn't in Chapter 5 of Season 2 of Mandalorian, so I'm assuming it's a new addition. But I was just like, that is so cool. I mean, it's like, what do you do with a Crate Dragon? Of course, you know, it's so big, you use it. And those Jawas, especially when that N1 kind of flew past from that, those Jawas were so happy. It's just like, that in itself is almost just pure Star Wars. I mean, since when have you ever seen Jawas kind of like riding along with like a Crate Dragon skull on top of a head? You haven't until now, which is amazing.
Exactly. But again, like you say, and you said it so succinctly, it was ultimate Star Wars. And like last week, there was so many nods and tips of the hat and little Easter eggs and clever things. Sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes you go, there's the nod. Ooh, there's the nod. And this time, there was loads of it. There was absolutely loads of it. But all of it made sense within the story. All of it felt like a thing that a character would do, you know. And so Vanth, I was so pleased to see Cobb Vanth because I think he's a great character. Great way to start the show. Great way. Setting up the table of what is, and that title, From the Desert Comes a Stranger, how much more Western do you want it? This was a Western today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the moment I saw Cad Bane's silhouette, it's just like, holy, that's totally got to be Cad Bane. There's no way around that it wouldn't be Cad Bane.
Yeah.
It's because it's one of those, bizarrely, it's a classic silhouette. It's like, you know, the man with no name, spaghetti Western silhouette. And the only person I think of when you see that silhouette in Star Wars is Cad Bane. So the fact that he is there, it's awesome. And great to have Corey Burton back doing the voice. I hope that we get to see him again and it's not just a little cameo. I hope that he makes another return and maybe a bigger impact in next week's episode.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So obviously after the titles and stuff, we're back with Din. He's found his way rather quickly but rather conveniently for us anyway, to whatever planet Luke is hiding out on with Grogu. For me, the moment that you see like R2-D2, I think it's just like, it's like being hugged by your mum, you know. It's like something very kind of like warm and reassuring about it. And you know, and especially the fact that like R2 being a git like he always is, he sets Din up, so he's like, he takes him over to where the kind of weird looking kind of like ant
the androids, yeah,
building, I guess, what is the start of Luke's main Jedi temple, and just kind of sets him up to kind of say, right, you're here now, that's it, I'm going to power down and you're just going to have to wait.
Classic R2, like I say, he can be a bit of a dick, can't he? And switching off is a thing that we've seen him do in the sequel trilogy. And also, it just struck me that, you're right, Din finds Luke very, very easily. This is not The Force Awakens. This isn't 2 hours and 10 minutes of looking for Luke and then the last 3 minutes finding him on an island somewhere. He kind of knows where to go. Yeah, they're not messing around.
Well, I don't know if it got a track or if it's just like the whole chain code thing or something. You know, and actually the question is it him or is it Grogu that he's tracking? It might be Grogu, for instance. It might be something like he's given Grogu something.
Well, that kid he did have a habit of wandering off, and he did give him the little mudhorn sigil necklace thing, didn't he, back in the day? And I love that it was chainmail because he did see the little chain link drop down.
Yes, that's right.
Episode. So that was a perfect little moment, which we'll get back to because that was a key moment of the whole episode. But just seeing R2's little radar, just like he did in Empire when he was looking for Luke on Hoth, that was a nice touch. And as it went down, it's R2. It's got to be. If it's not R2, I'm disappointed. Like you said, if it's not Cad Bane, I'm disappointed. So there was so many things that the anticipation was satisfied. It didn't go against expectation in that sense, but nonetheless satisfying because you've got it is R2. Thank God it is R2. It was just brilliant. And the visuals for that planet, I don't know what the planet is yet. I don't know if it's in the
They've
subtitles.
not named it.
They've not named
No.
it. That'll come out. That was really nicely done.
Beautiful planet, really beautiful. I mean, I did check Wikipedia, and as far as we're aware anyway, it hasn't been named anywhere. But, I mean, it had the vibe of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, with like all the kind of bamboo stuff in it. So it had that samurai, Japanese vibe about it, which is very Jedi, very perfect environment, really. Bit like Agent Kloss for training Jedi, really. Loads of different kind of natural creatures and stuff like that to really make it a very vibrant planet in the Force. So, you saw all those toads get lifted up by Luke. And then, like, when Grogu's and Luke's running and training, and Luke's jumping on those big warthog animals and stuff like that, which, again, is classic Star Wars thing, reaction to do, kind of like step on an animal and it kind of raises its head. I think that whole sequence was just really well done. And the thing that really hit me was, oh my God, that Luke Skywalker de-aging, deepfake, CGI technology has come on leaps and bounds, like massively. They just about got away with it with the end of season 2 of Mando, but now it's good enough that you can basically hold up a whole episode, which gives us like so much more thought and perspective as to maybe what we could now get just generally now from Star Wars. In the coming months. Yeah, absolutely.
It was so well done, to the level that when they cut away, I thought they won't go back. That is a lot of effect to do what they've done, and they did go back. And the voice, I mean, you interviewed the guys from Respeecher a while back. The work they've done on the voice is phenomenal, and now we know from that Disney Gallery at the end of season 2 that Hamill's on set, so you assume that he was there. I think they filmed a lot of that at Manhattan Beach. Some of that would have been filmed there, presumably with Hamill. You've got to assume, given the process for Respeecher, that he would have done the voice and then they would have done their work on that. So he's involved in every element. It's Mark Hamill back as Luke Skywalker. Cannot believe that we're at this stage that the technology can make him look like he did 5 years after Jedi. Still needs a good haircut. Don't like the hair, but that's Luke's problem.
The hair's it's Luke hair.
It's Luke hair. It is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he had a skin fade, I think we'd be like, what the hell?
True. Very true. But, it was so well done, and everything felt, the best I can say, and we're going to rabbit about this for too long, the best I can say is everything that was said and everything that we saw felt organic. It felt like it should have happened. And I know that sounds stupid, because whatever we see is what happened, of course. But sometimes, because we're so immersed in all of this, you kind of, in your head, we all have our own headcanon. It's our worst enemy. No doubt, headcanon is our worst enemy, because it just raises expectation that can't be matched. This one, none of this had even really occurred to me. The training and all that element of it. And there were so many nice little nods to Dagobah. Obviously, the blue backpack that we mentioned, jumping the flips through the air, through the jungle. Yeah. Just lots of little bits. He actually starts talking to Grogu about Yoda. He offers him Yoda's lightsaber. I mean, just so many respectful nods to the past. But you can see that Luke is ready to push on. And the conversation with Ahsoka about, I don't know if he really wants this, that really, I thought, was really interesting, because it's opened up a lot of questions that, like, is Cobb Vanth dead? No, he's not. He'll come back. Like, if Fennec can come back from that Chapter 5 Gunslinger episode, Vanth can come back from this. But nevertheless, the guy that I thought was going to be Dash Rendar, he ain't coming back. The question that's laid in front of Grogu now is immense. Are you still a Mandalorian foundling? Or are you a Jedi initiate or a Jedi Padawan? However they want to frame it. I mean, Ahsoka does actually say the word Padawan. So,
she does, yeah.
He's got a real quandary there. I mean, I love the fact that he didn't go and see him. The fact that he walked away and respected Ahsoka's words and understood what she meant. It's a choice now. And now we have a choice. Yeah. He's not the youngest, he's probably the oldest one of a lot of them. But you know what I mean? That character now has this massive... Do I take the Mandalorian path with Din, or do I follow the Jedi path with Luke? It's brilliantly set up. What
a great way to end this episode as well, on that cliffhanger. Will he, won't he? I mean, and I think one of the things that going to weigh up is his memory. Luke might talk about how, like, he can't really remember. He's kind of unblocking rather than, reteaching. He's unblocking his memories as to things he's been taught. And then Luke gives him the delightful gift of remembering Order 66. Seeing that through Grogu's eyes. Again, it's just one of those things that I didn't think that, at least in this series, we were likely to see, if at all.
You thought that would happen in Kenobi, didn't you?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, or maybe not. I kind of, if I'm honest, I almost thought that maybe what happened to Grogu might end up being relegated to a Marvel comic series. That's kind of where where my head was at.
Yeah.
You're right. In some respects, Grogu's now just been reminded of all that trauma, all that pain and suffering and death that he saw and witnessed, and one, he wasn't really old enough or powerful enough to do anything about, but two, okay, Luke, you want me to be a Jedi again, but you know you're going to drag me back into this horror, potentially this horrible world where I saw all these people die in front of me and I couldn't do anything about it. And obviously, then you've got the other option of, do I go with this guy who's been really good to me, you know, has cared for me and stuff like that? And you know, Luke does bring up a good point that for Grogu, the span of like a human's lifespan is nothing to him, really. He'll live for like 10 times as long as Din Djarin's going to live for, or Luke, or Ahsoka. So, some respects, Grogu could potentially, anyway, even if he doesn't necessarily focus on his Force training now, could circle back round at a later date anyway.
That's true. I mean, it's the old Han and Chewie thing, isn't it? You know, Chewie was 190 when he met Han and 230 when he died. So it's Han Solo to Chewie is like your third dog. The lifespan thing is a similar process, isn't it? So, you know, and it's the same with Yoda. It's easy for Yoda to say don't form attachments and don't become close. And I know that's a Jedi thing as well, but it makes you wonder the age of the Jedi that came up with all these rules, because Yoda can't stay attached to people for too long. If you think of the High Republic, everybody he knew in the High Republic, apart from Uriel Poof, who dies between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones anyway, they're all dead.
Gone.
So he can be a mentor, he can be a colleague, as genial and friendly as possible. But for Yoda to form an attachment, it's constant loss, and that would wear a Jedi down. So you understand the process. And going back to last week's episode when the armor is having the conversation with Din and about attachments, you know, Jedi don't form attachment, and Din's like, that's the exact opposite to us. We form groups, we form family units, essentially. And so now Grogu has got that, like you say, that moment. And I think Luke almost knows that he has sort of opened a Pandora's box when he puts his hand on his head and does the, you know, the Star Trek 3 remember moment. You know, and goes back to that sequence. And I thought that when he saw the 3 Jedi fighting, the one in the middle, I thought that's Nick Gillard's. I thought that was Sindralig. And of course, Ben saw that same fight from another angle. So I'd be very curious to see if it is that same thing and they are trying to recreate that, or whether it is just another Jedi. But that's how it looked to me, certainly. That's how it felt to me. That sequence, apart from being like, holy crap, now we've not only been within the boundaries of Return of the Jedi, we're now in the boundaries in flashbacks of Revenge of the Sith. It's like, wow, just so many cool things.
This series, in the last 2 weeks, has given us so many surprises and so much stuff that, you know, we certainly didn't think about we were going to get in the Book of Boba Fett. Let's be fair, when we talk about Boba Fett, we were basically speculating he's going to spend most of his time on Tatooine, and for the most part, this series has. But then in this last 2 episodes, it's opened it wide open, like completely open. As much as I really liked the first 4 episodes of Boba Fett, I kind of wonder, it's like, have they maybe shoehorned all this up into the last 2 episodes when they could have maybe split this out across it so it didn't necessarily feel like such a dramatic change? Or maybe that's what they wanted to do. You start to think about stuff like Game of Thrones. You'd cut away from the Lannisters back to the Starks and then to somebody else and that. And maybe they could have done it that way and equaled it out. So then, at least from a criticism point, you wouldn't necessarily have people kind of going, it's now the, you know, Mandalorian. But again, this is a good reason why we heard before about possibly Mandalorian season 2.5, because let's be fair, these last 2 episodes could have been the start of season 3 of Mandalorian. Even just seeing Yoda's lightsaber, and it made me think, well, of course, did Luke just grab that when, you know, he left Dagobah for the last time in Jedi? Did he just pick it up and go, no one's going to need this, I'm going to take this and pass it on? Or maybe there was instructions by Yoda that we saw off camera to keep, you know, take my lightsaber, pass it on where appropriate, because obviously it's the perfect size for Grogu. Well, I mean, it's still a little bit too big.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
I'm going to have to put it down here because I think it's important to lay our cards on the table, and you kind of did it last week anyway when you were on Radio 5, when you had to choose between a phaser and a lightsaber. Yeah. So if you had a choice between chainmail and a lightsaber, what are you going to pick?
Looking at Grogu's situation and where he is, you don't know. I mean, there's no sense of time. That's one thing. You don't know how long these episodes take place over the season so far. There's no sense of that. In terms of Grogu, that choice, it feels like his heart is still with Din. He's training, he's getting stuff. That bit when he's bouncing around like Yoda in Attack of the Clones was great. I love that sequence with the remote. And then when he crushes it at the end, and Luke seemed to like that. I thought he would scold him, but he didn't. He kind of liked that. All of that was great. But you've got to wonder how patient Luke has been. Undoubtedly, I would say Ahsoka's there for Luke. She's not there for Grogu. She was like, I can't train him, but I know somebody who can. But she's there as somebody who was a close friend and compatriot of Luke's father, and there was a nice little moment there. You know, when she goes and she doesn't say anything, she just turns around and she might have been walking back to camp or something, but Luke's like, will I see you again? So he knows she's going. But nevertheless, there's just doubt in the training. Luke as a teacher needs Grogu to know that he wants it, and Luke needs to know that he wants it. He doesn't want to force it on anyone. The intention is for Grogu to be that first student. They both said it. But nevertheless, Luke's got to have confidence as teaching the first person he's taught that this guy wants it. But again, back to something you said a few minutes ago, how Luke says, I'm not really training him. I'm just freeing his mind because he kind of already knows this. I'm just unlocking his memories. It's kind of a halfway house between training and repairing his memory.
Yeah, it's like physio for Jedi.
Yeah.
You know, it's physiotherapy or like kind of like memory regression in some respects.
Yeah.
You know, he's blocked all this stuff off. You know, the one thing that I was pondering as I was emptying the recycling earlier on, just before we came on,
as you do,
was actually some of the dialogue. And I think probably the hardest thing for people to do in Star Wars, and this has really been since after Return of Jedi, is write Jedi philosophy and Jedi teachings. There is a risk, and I think there's a couple of points where John and Dave may have fell into this trap, whereby it kind of felt more like a cookie cutter, hallmark, easily summed up thing. And I suppose that's the problem, is that Luke still isn't that experienced in the Force. Like you said, Luke has to have Grogu's buy-in to give him the confidence. And I think, you know, in some respects, it would be a journey together. It would be a case of Grogu relearning stuff and also Luke learning how to teach somebody.
Yeah.
And you then wonder, assuming that Grogu goes back with Mando in the next episode, or maybe we don't see it actually, maybe this is something that is now left to season 3 of Mandalorian.
I think so.
But assuming whenever it happens, if Grogu had stayed, would Luke's teachings have been different to the point whereby he wouldn't have ended up in Ben Solo's bedroom with a lightsaber?
Brilliant question. That's a brilliant question. From what you've just said, this is all blue sky stuff to us. We've just seen this. It's right. It's reciprocal, isn't it? It's if Luke can unlock Grogu to a degree that Grogu is reciprocal to what Luke's teaching him, Luke knows he's doing it right. But if he rails against that, then I guess it's the acid test of, well, maybe I'm not doing this right, or maybe this works for one guy and it doesn't work for another girl, or whatever. But Luke maybe thinks, well, if I can get Grogu to a point where a lot of those memories are back, and he's not too traumatized by remembering Order 66 and all the nightmares, that yes, he's his first student essentially, but almost being another sensei in a dojo sort of thing. He's got knowledge. Luke's leading this thing. He's the son of Darth Vader. He defeated the Emperor. He's the hero of the galaxy, blew up a Death Star and all that stuff. So Luke's a legend. And I did half expect a young Kylo to come walking into this episode. I really did. But I think I might have just completely lost my if that had happened. But, you know, I think they need each other to a degree. And Luke needs to know that Grogu wants it, but Luke also needs the confidence of knowing he's doing the right thing and he's going down the right path. Ahsoka doesn't want to muddy the waters, I would imagine. She's smart enough in the Force to know that Luke's reached a bit of a quandary, and so the simplest answer to that quandary is lay out the choice to Grogu. Take the saber, take the chainmail. It's as simple as that. No hard feelings, kid. You know, you've got to follow your own path. And if it goes with Mando as a foundling, as a Mandalorian foundling, which is very much how Din Djarin sees Grogu still clearly, can't let that go. And I love the way they've built that up. Like I say, last week really layered that on. I mean, will we see that choice next week? I don't know if we will. I think that's coming season 3 Mando, personally, like you do.
Yeah, I think so. This episode, compared to all the others, has jumped around almost as much as this podcast has. But
not quite that much, but yeah.
Not quite much. You know, jumping right near to the end, you know, we see the Pikes walk into the sanctuary and just drop a Cantona full of I guess thermal detonators or something, and just, I again assume, just wipes out everybody in that cantina. Now that is something a bit like the butcher's scene that we saw in last week's episode. This is something we've never really seen in Star Wars. This is proper, you know, and bear in mind that this is, you know, the whole of Star Wars is pretty much based on a group of terrorists against an empire. This is like proper terrorism. This is how you scare the population of a town into order. And I was really surprised because obviously, again, I didn't really think that we had seen as much of Jennifer Beals as maybe I was hoping in respects of her character. I was hoping her character was going to play a bigger part, but maybe her character will play a bigger part by being the catalyst to really set things alight next week and kind of get Boba out of his kind of malaise and start kicking ass again.
Within that scene, sad thought that we've just lost Figuring Dawn.
Yes.
We've just possibly lost... I don't think we saw Max Rebo in that scene. I could be wrong, but I don't think we saw Max. We did see a bit, and we saw, obviously, the drummer. We saw Madame Fripp. I was quite convinced that she was somebody higher up the chain, that she was a player, that she was more involved. And that may still be the case. That may be the reason why the Pikes took her out, because she was a threat. But as it stands right now in the cold sort of light of day, they've just killed the owner of Sanctuary. And she was just a businesswoman and nothing more. And yet it felt like she was more involved and more of a player. So that did surprise me. Aggressive negotiations is the phrase I would use for that.
Definitely,
They've sent Cad Bane. So they've got the biker gang to do the dirty work by taking out the Tuskens. They've got Cad Bane to go and quell or quash or whatever Mos Pelgo, because they probably think that's where Mando's going to go, because they're probably savvy enough to know a bit of the history of the armour of Boba Fett and all that malarkey. And now they've gone into Sanctuary, which is smack in the middle of Mos Espa, and they've blown the place up and taken out, you would imagine, everyone in there would have died.
You know, I mean, there was quite a large blast which came out of that explosion. So you would expect, or maybe she doesn't, maybe she's clocked it, seen the droid, and then she's hightailed it over, you know, the back end of a bar or something, and, you know, it's shielded enough. But yeah, I mean, body count's going to be high, because that place was pretty rammed in that episode. It was. And again, it's a shame, because it was becoming a really cool little location. It was that Casablanca Rick's bar kind of feel. I was liking that vibe of it. The whole thing next week, it's now set. I feel it's now really set. I thought today would be part one of a 2-part big action finale. And whilst there was action in this, it was a different kind of speed. And it was a much slower episode, but I feel like we've learned so much and seen stuff that we didn't expect to see. So that lack of real action pace this time hasn't bothered me one bit. I was fully expecting a foot to the floor episode. I felt like this episode would feel like the N1 flying down Beggar's Canyon last week. And it wasn't, but I don't care, because what we got was so unexpected and just so sweet in every sense. And now, like you say, they've set up Mos Espa. Now Fett's going to be angry now. She was under his protection. Now that's a score to settle as far as he's concerned, because you remember when he first met her, you know, he was very clear, like, I just want to let you know that we're going to look after you. And she's like, yes, absolutely. And that was an agreed thing. Everybody kind of understood that he was the new big boss on the hill character. And now she's been killed right under his nose. And he has got Cassanton there, which was great to see. The mayor was in the mayor's aide. You know, the Twi'lek guy was there. I don't know what part he's going to play, but he's there for a reason. Can we not just feed him to the bloody rancor? Because even in that one line, it's just like, oh, he's on holiday. It was, you know, it was all booked. It's like, yeah, I approved his leave 2 weeks ago. It's like, off. Just, it was complete. It's just like, I'm guessing, kind of surprised they didn't say he's gone to Batuu, though. I was expecting. Yeah, I expect him to go, oh, yeah, he's got a Galaxy's Edge. Or, yeah, he boarded the house in last week. Yep. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, yeah.
Hi, this is John Morton from The Empire Strikes Back. I'm Dak Rotha, or Bespin Boba, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
I think it's going to be interesting, and I can't wait for next week's episode for the just for the finale and just to kind of see how things kind of wrap up. But also just to kind of like, you know, retrospectively look back at the series. The story with Boba Fett is kind of like this through line, which hasn't really grown. And I think if we compare it to other series and shows about underworldy, like mob mafia stuff, there's so many ways that maybe they could have expanded this out, but they've kept it really tight and they've kind of allowed other stuff around to almost like take us to different places that we wouldn't necessarily get. So it's quite surprising, and it's made it quite interesting. But obviously I think what it's done is it's made it really, for some people, I think quite disappointing. I mean, other people really fulfilling expectations and beyond that, like me and you. And so it's going to be interesting when we get to the end of next week's episode, how it's all going to kind of slot into place and stuff, and where are we? Have we been fairly served a good Boba Fett story, or has that really kind of sacrificed just to catch us up to where Boba Fett is now, and also all this other stuff which was pretty much unfinished business with the Mandalorian? So it's going to be really interesting. It really is. And two quick things. One, I'm convinced more than ever there will be a second season of the Book of Boba Fett. Oh, I think so. You've not told his story in any fullness yet. But secondly, I think Lucasfilm have been quite savvy in that you'll have Ahsoka coming, and she's been in this now and in The Mandalorian. Yeah. And now The Mandalorian's been in Book of Boba Fett and obviously his own show. And Fett's been in both shows, and you kind of feel like they will all cross over with each other's story. And so
what it's doing, and it's a bit like Marvel do it with comics. You know, you might only read 2 of the 4 Spider-Man titles, and they'll do a multi-crossover story, which means you've got to buy the 2 titles you don't normally buy. What Lucasfilm are doing is making it absolutely essential that you watch everything. My brother-in-law, who's an avid listener to this podcast, watched last week's episode and felt like he'd missed a couple of things. And he had seen it before, but he went back and watched the last 3 episodes of Mandalorian. And I wonder how many other people are going to do that. And now this week, Cad Bane comes in, bit of a Google search, and I go, oh, he's in Bad Batch. That's fairly new, isn't it? Let me go and watch that episode of Bad Batch. All of a sudden, Bad Batch starts getting increased numbers because people are interested in this kick-ass character. And then they move on to the Clone Wars. Exactly. And Ahsoka, it goes without saying, she generates interest wherever she goes. So I think they've been very savvy, almost from a business point of view, but not. It's a story thing, but because it drags people into each other's storylines. But I think as a whole, you can look at Book of Boba Fett as being the story of Boba Fett, and he's no doubt the central character. And this is bringing everybody to him. This is setting up all the players that will come and be his muscle in that 7th episode. And so we want to know how they get there. I'm assuming that season 3 of The Mandalorian and certainly season 1 of Ahsoka have got more than enough storyline to be dealing with as it is. This feels like you can sort of watch a bit of Boba Fett, and he's not the focal character within his last 2 episodes, far from it. I'm more than confident next week he will stand up, because that one line that sticks in my head, even above everything else that has been said, is when Cad Bane is kind of warning Cobb Vanth and says he's about Fett, how lethal he is. He's worked for the Empire. That reputation was earned. It wasn't given to Fett. That's not Django's reputation. That's Boba Fett's reputation. And he earned it. And we know from reading War of the Bounty Hunters and all the other stuff we've seen, pre-Empire, pre-Jedi, pre-being swallowed by a giant space monster, that he earned every second of that. We haven't seen that guy come back yet, and it's like John Wick retiring and then somebody kills his dog and John Wick is back. Next week, the Star Wars equivalent of John Wick is going to come back. But I think they've poked the bear, and I think next week is where Fett really goes primal on somebody.
So do you think we're going to see Cad Bane again in next week's episode? Because, of course, you're forgetting that also had a lot of heat with Fennec Shand in the Bad Batch. Yeah. So that's something that is even more in people's minds and stuff, because that's only last year. So that'll be interesting just to see that. And are we going to get our wish? Are we going to see Boba riding atop a Rancor?
Are we going to see Omega? Because if you've got Fennec and you've got Cad Bane, then maybe that's where Omega comes into it. Maybe that's the moment.
Oh, yeah. The story is not yet over with by any stretch of imagination. So, the good thing is both me and you will be there very quickly after the episode to record our thoughts and mumblings and ramblings like we've done this week. So
I can't wait either. This has been a joy. I hope I can hear it in your voice. I hope you can hear it in mine. Proper
Absolutely.
Buzzing. We've got an episode of Planet Leia out on Friday. We have a Good Morning Tatooine, which is back on Sunday. You and me are both on that with Greg and with Brian, of course, our show host. And then Making Tracks will be back next Tuesday. And then Wednesday, a week today, it's the big finale.
Big finale. I suppose, in case people want to get in touch with either me or you, or us, I should say, for Making Tracks, or, even for next week's episode, if anybody wants to send in a question or comment or something about their thoughts on Book of Boba Fett, that's more than welcome. So how can listeners get in touch?
If you want to stay part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com or check out the free Panther Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@panthertracks.com. I will say, as much as we will have questions about anything on our regular shows, if you want to send questions in talking about Book of Boba Fett, feel free. radio@panthertracks.com or news@panthertracks.com, or you can tweet either of us, mmulcaster, prefect_timing. Send us questions. We'll talk about anything. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds @PantherTracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Panther Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. And I'm very pleased to say, this Sunday, 9 o'clock UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, on Facebook and YouTube, it's the return of Good Morning Tatooine.
And I'm on it, and you're on it, and Darth Elvis is on it, and Brian's on it, so it should be a lot of fun, so make sure you tune in for that. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you download the other amazing Panther Tracks podcasts when they hit your streams or however you get your podcasts. And of course, thank you very much for listening. So Mark, thank you very much, mate. It's been good fun.
It's been a lot of fun. I've proper enjoyed this stuff. I always enjoy it, mate, but I've really enjoyed this one.
I will speak to you on Sunday morning, because we're going to be recording Making Tracks.
That's right.
And then I'll speak to you again on Sunday night. For now, thank you very much for listening, and everybody stay safe and take care, and may the force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Planet Leia.